Welcome to Simplified UPSC by PPP, where we listen, learn, and grow together. Detailed lecture notes in English and Hindi, plus practice questions for prelims and mains, only on our Telegram channel. Link in description. Like and subscribe for more.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging way beneath the surface, moving beyond the land we know into, well, the real engine room of our planet. The marine environment.
It's vast, isn't it?
Huge. Covers almost 3/4 of the globe. But it's the life within it, often invisible, from microscopic cells to massive whales, that's driving critical cycles for the entire planet. We're talking oxygen, climate, everything.
Absolutely. You know, when we talk ecosystems, marine life isn't just in the ocean. It's actually dictating how the atmosphere behaves, how the global carbon cycle works.
Right.
So our mission today, using the detailed scientific material you provided, is to really build a solid conceptual foundation. We're not skimming the surface here.
No summaries.
No. We're going deep into the classifications, the unique biology, and crucially, the very serious systemic threats these organisms are facing right now.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Because to get the scale of the challenge, you need the details, the mechanics. Like, why is a diatom functionally different from a whale? And why can just a small shift in ocean acidity potentially crash an entire food web?
Exactly.
So we have to start with the basics. Defining the environment itself, based on something fundamental like salinity.
Right. The environment really sets the parameters for life. And when classifying aquatic systems, the first big split is salinity, basically. How much dissolved salt is in the water. We measure this in parts per thousand ppm.
Okay. And the biggest category by far, the dominant one on Earth, that's the saltwater environments.
Precisely. We start with marine ecosystems. These are defined as having a salt concentration of 35 parts per thousand, 35 ppt, or even higher.
So, pretty salty.
Very salty. And this includes shallow seas, think continental shelves, but also the huge, deep expanses of the open ocean. This is where you find an incredible diversity of life.
But some of the most dynamic zones, maybe the most productive, are actually where freshwater meets salt, the transition areas.
Ah, yes, the brackish water ecosystems. These are fascinating. The salt content here varies a lot, anywhere from 5 pp up to 35 pp.
So it fluctuates.
Constantly. You get tidal action, river flow. It's a physically dynamic place, but incredibly fertile because of all the nutrients washing in from the land. Think estuaries, those semi-enclosed areas where rivers dump into the sea, salt marshes, mangrove swamps, mangrove forests. They'll fall into this category, real biological hotspots.
And just for context, because our main focus is marine and brackish today, the material does mention freshwater ecosystems, lakes, ponds, rivers, streams. Understanding these boundaries helps us see how organisms have to adapt, right?
It absolutely does. Knowing the environment sailing brackish fresh helps explain why organisms live where they do. So once we've set the stage environmentally, we look at the inhabitants themselves. How do we classify them?
It's not just species, is it?
No, it's more about their lifestyle, their niche. It's based on their zone of occurrence, where they live in the water column or on the bottom, and their ability to move between these zones. This gives us 3 main groups.
And the first group, arguably the most critical in terms of sheer biomass and fundamental role, are the ones we usually can't even see, the plankton.
Plankton. The name essentially means drifters or floaters. These are organisms, some microscopic, some surprisingly large like jellyfish, whose movement is basically passive.
They can't fight the current.
Pretty much. They can't swim strongly enough to really counteract currents, waves, or wind. They're carried along, hostages to the water's movement, you could say.
And within this massive group of drifters, you find the absolute powerhouses of the planet's primary production. Let's get into phytoplankton.
Right. Phytoplankton are the plants of the plankton world, the autotrophs. They do photosynthesis. They're the primary producers.
Like tiny ocean plants.
Exactly. Mostly single-celled organisms, like diatoms, which have intricate silica shells, or dinoflagellates, some of which can cause red tides. What makes them so incredibly important is how fast they can reproduce.
Under the right conditions.
Yes, give them enough nutrients, sunlight, and warmth, and their populations can explode. These are called blooms. Their ecological job. This is non-negotiable. They form the very base of almost every marine food web.
But their ability to produce is limited by physics, isn't it? There's this hard boundary related to sunlight, the euphotic zone restriction.
This is a really critical concept. Phytoplankton needs sunlight. So their production is limited to the euphotic zone, that top layer of the water, where enough light penetrates for photosynthesis to actually happen effectively, meaning net productivity.
Yeah, so if they sink too deep.
If they sink below that zone, photosynthesis slows way down or stops altogether. And because the ocean is always mixing, staying in that sunlit zone is a constant challenge. But it's essential for them and for their role in capturing carbon.
Okay, so you have these incredibly fast-growing producers. What stops them from just taking over everything? Is there a check?
There is. The check comes from the next group, the zooplankton. These are the primary consumers. They eat the phytoplankton.
The grazers of the sea.
Pretty much. This group is diverse too. It includes tiny microscopic flagellates, slightly larger copepods, which are incredibly abundant, krill, and even, as I mentioned, macroscopic things like jellyfish. Despite their size, jellyfish are generally considered plankton because they mostly drift. Zooplankton are that essential middle link, passing the energy fixed by phytoplankton up the food chain.
Right, so we have the drifters, producers, and consumers. To round out the main classifications, we need the active swimmers and the bottom dwellers.
That brings us to the Nekton. These are the active swimmers, organisms that have the power and ability to move independently of the currents.
Fish, obviously.
Fish, yes, most of them, but also marine mammals like whales and dolphins, sea turtles, penguins, and even some invertebrates like squid. They can cross ocean zones, migrate vast distances.
And the last major group, those living on or in the seafloor.
That's the benthos, the bottom-dwelling organisms, and we can subdivide this group based on whether they move or not. You have sessile benthos. These are fixed in one place, attached to the bottom. Think sponges, corals, barnacles, oysters, sea anemones.
They're rooted, essentially.
Or cemented, yes.
Sure.
Then you have the vagrant benthos. These guys move around on or in the seabed. Crabs, lobsters, starfish, sea cucumbers, snails, certain worms, they live on the bottom, but they aren't stuck in one spot. So plankton, nekton, benthos, drifters, swimmers, bottom dwellers. That's the fundamental breakdown.
Okay, classification sorted. Now let's really focus on the producers, the marine flora. We touched on phytoplankton, these microscopic giants. Let's just underline their sheer scale again.
Yes, the phytoplankton's foundational role is just immense. They're not just at the base, they are the base. They convert sunlight into the energy that fuels almost everything else.
The source material gives a simple food chain example, right?
It does, a very clear one. Diatoms, which are phytoplankton, are eaten by crustaceans, which are often zooplankton or small benthic creatures. And those crustaceans are then eaten by fish, like herrings, which are nekton.
So the herring fishery, a major commercial interest, depends directly on tiny diatoms.
Directly. The health and abundance of those diatom populations dictate the potential size and health of herring stocks, and countless other fisheries too. It's a direct energy link.
Okay, so that covers the microscopic producers. Now, the macroscopic ones. People often lump seagrasses and seaweeds together, but they're fundamentally different. Let's start with seagrasses. What's the key distinction?
The absolute key difference is their evolutionary history and structure. Seagrasses are not algae. They are true angiosperms flowering plants that have adapted to live fully submerged in marine environments.
So they have roots, stems, leaves, like land plants.
Exactly. Unlike seaweeds, seagrasses have true leaves, often strap-like or oval. Crucially, they have complex root systems, called rhizomes, that spread horizontally beneath the sediment, anchoring them firmly. They even produce flowers and seeds.
And this structure means they live in specific places and perform specific jobs, right? They're not out in the deep ocean.
No, definitely not. They have very specific habitat requirements. They need shallow coastal waters because they need sunlight reaching the bottom. They prefer sandy or muddy bottoms where their rhizomes can take hold. And they generally need relatively calm, clear water. Too much wave action can rip them out, and too much suspended sediment blocks the light.
Where do we see them thriving?
The source mentions significant seagrass meadows along the Tamil Nadu coast in India and in the clear, salty lagoons of the Lakshadweep Islands. Ideal conditions there.
Okay, let's analyze their functions. They do more than just produce energy. They're described as ecosystem engineers. What does that mean in practice?
It means they physically shape their environment in critical ways. First, their dense underwater meadows act like baffles, reducing wave and current energy. This protects coastlines from erosion. It's a natural sea defense.
Okay, physical stabilization.
Second, those extensive root and rhizome systems are brilliant at sediment control. They bind the sediment together, preventing it from being stirred up by currents or waves. This keeps the water clearer, which in turn benefits the seagrass itself, a positive feedback loop.
So they trap sediment and keep the water clear. What else?
And third, perhaps most importantly for biodiversity, they provide vital habitat provision. Seagrass beds are complex, three-dimensional structures that serve as critical nursery grounds, feeding areas, and shelter for countless species of juvenile fish. Invertebrates like shrimp and crabs and many other marine creatures. They're essential for replenishing fish stocks.
So incredibly important coastal habitats. Now, what about the other group people see, the seaweeds? How do they fit in?
Seaweeds are the macroscopic algae. They lack the true roots, stems, and leaves of seagrasses. They typically attach to hard surfaces like rocks, using a structure called a holdfast.
But they're still very important, especially economically.
Hugely important economically. They are the source of several valuable products. Agar-agar, used in labs for growing cultures and as a food thickener. Alginates, used in everything from textiles to pharmaceuticals and food products. They're also a rich source of iodine.
And potentially energy.
Yes. There's significant interest in using certain types of seaweed for methane production through anaerobic digestion. It's a potential biofuel source.
But there's a downside to seaweed, especially when large amounts wash ashore and decompose. A hidden danger.
There is. While valuable when harvested, massive accumulations of rotting seaweed on beaches can become a serious problem. The decomposition process, particularly under anaerobic conditions, releases hydrogen sulfide, H2S.
That's the rotten egg smell.
That's the one. But it's more than just unpleasant. It's highly toxic. It interferes with cellular respiration. There have been documented cases of poisoning causing symptoms like vomiting and diarrhea, especially in closed coastal areas with large seaweed blooms.
Wow. And environmentally, they also act as a kind of warning sign.
They can, yes. Seaweeds are known to be excellent indicators of pollution, particularly heavy metal pollution. They have a strong capacity to bind and accumulate heavy metals like lead, cadmium, and mercury from the surrounding water into their tissues.
So analyzing seaweed can tell you about water quality.
Precisely. It makes them useful biomonitors. But it also means they are vulnerable to the same threats as seagrasses pollution, physical disturbance, habitat loss, and changes in water quality. Okay, now let's zoom out from the specific flora to a global process that links marine life directly to our climate system, the biological pump.
Right. This is a concept that really highlights how much the ocean and the life in it influences the atmosphere. How is it defined?
The biological pump is basically the sum of all the biological processes that work together to transport carbon from the sunlit surface waters, the euphotic zone, down into the deep ocean interior.
Taking CO2 out of the surface and sinking it.
Exactly. It's a crucial mechanism for regulating atmospheric CO2 levels, and therefore global climate, over long time scales, hundreds to thousands of years.
So how does it actually work? Walk us through the process.
It starts again with phytoplankton. They absorb dissolved CO2 from the surface water during photosynthesis, incorporating that carbon into their cells, into organic matter.
Like trees drawing down CO2 on land?
A very good analogy.
Yeah.
Now, some of that carbon gets recycled quickly near the surface when zooplankton eat the phytoplankton and respire CO2. But a significant fraction gets transported downwards, primarily through sinking particles. When phytoplankton die, or when zooplankton produce fecal pellets after eating them, this organic matter clumps together into what scientists call marine snow.
Marine snow, like underwater snowflakes?
Sort of, yeah. Aggregates of dead cells, fecal matter, mucus, other debris, slowly sinking through the water column. As this marine snow sinks out of the euphotic zone into the deep ocean, the carbon it contains is effectively removed from contact with the atmosphere for a very long time.
Sequestered.
Sequestered, yes. It might get stored in deep-sea sediments or circulate in the deep ocean currents for centuries. This continuous downward transport is the pump in action. It's a massive, biologically driven carbon sequestration process that directly helps cool the planet.
Amazing. Okay, shifting gears from global processes to specific, highly evolved fauna, let's talk about cetaceans, whales, dolphins, porpoises. They're recognized as incredibly intelligent, sensitive animals, and there's been a significant policy development regarding them.
Yes, a really groundbreaking one, particularly highlighted in the source material regarding India. The Ministry of Environment and Forests, or MOEF, took a really remarkable step. Following public pressure and protests, they declared dolphins specifically as non-human persons.
Non-human persons. That's a powerful phrase. What does it mean legally?
It's more than just giving them protection like endangered species. It grants them a kind of moral standing. Based on this declaration, the ministry effectively banned keeping dolphins in captivity for entertainment purposes anywhere in the country.
Why? What was the reasoning?
The official reasoning explicitly cited the high intelligence, complex social behaviors, and sentience observed in dolphins. The ministry stated it was simply morally unacceptable to keep them captive for entertainment purposes. It's a profound shift, acknowledging their intrinsic worth and right to freedom, moving beyond seeing them merely as property or resources.
Fascinating. Now, let's touch on the incredible variety of life forms and the adaptations needed to survive in different parts of the ocean, dealing with pressure, temperature, lack of light. The source gives some examples, contrasting different animals.
Right, the physical conditions demand specific biological solutions.
Mhm.
Consider breathing. Eels, for example, or fish, they have gills, efficiently extracting dissolved oxygen directly from the water. This allows them to live fully submerged at various depths.
Okay, standard fish adaptation.
But contrast that with sea snakes. They look like eels, live in the ocean, but they're reptiles. They evolved from land snakes.
So they have lungs.
Exactly. They have lungs and need to breathe air. So, despite living in the ocean, mostly in the warmer parts of the Indian and Pacific, they have to regularly surface to breathe. That fundamentally limits their depth range of behavior compared to a gill-breathing fish like an eel.
Different evolutionary paths leading to different solutions for living in the sea. What about sharks? They embody predatory power, but there's a twist with the biggest ones.
Ah, the shark paradox. Yes, sharks are renowned for having some of the most powerful jaws on the planet. Think great whites, tiger sharks. Yet the absolute largest sharks in existence, the whale shark, the basking shark, the megamouth shark, are completely harmless to large animals like us.
Why? What do they eat?
They're filter feeders. They subsist almost entirely on tiny microscopic plankton and small fish or crustaceans. They swim slowly with their huge mouths open, filtering vast amounts of water. It shows that sheer size and power don't always equate to top-level predation. Sometimes, efficiently tapping into the abundant lower levels of the food web is a more successful strategy for gigantism.
Okay, this is where the picture gets, frankly, quite alarming. All these intricate systems, the biological pump, the crucial coastal habitats, the intelligent life, they're all under siege from a range of interconnected human-caused threats.
Yes, this is the critical part of the discussion. And we have to start with a pervasive chemical threat tied directly to our changing atmosphere, ocean acidification.
Right. The other CO2 problem, as it's sometimes called, it starts, simply enough, with the ocean absorbing carbon dioxide from the air.
It absorbs a lot of it, about a quarter of what we emit. But this absorption triggers a chemical chain reaction in the seawater. The CO2 reacts with water to form carbonic acid, H2CO3.
Acid, so the ocean is becoming more acidic.
It is. The carbonic acid then releases hydrogen ions, which increases the acidity, lowers the pH, but critically, it also consumes carbonate ions, CO32. These carbonate ions become less available in the water.
And why are carbonate ions so vital? Why does reducing them matter so much?
Because they are the essential building blocks for calcification. This is the process marine organisms use to build their shells and skeletons out of calcium carbonate. Think corals, oysters, clams, mussels, sea urchins, lobsters, crabs, even some types of plankton.
So, less carbonate means?
It means it's harder for these organisms to build their structures. They have to expend more energy to extract the carbonate they need. Or, in more acidic conditions, their existing shells and skeletons can actually start to dissolve.
But like trying to build a house while someone's dissolving the bricks?
Exactly. It compromises their structural integrity, making them weaker, more vulnerable.
And the list of victims here includes the very architects of major marine ecosystems.
Precisely. The victims of acidification are widespread and critical. Hard tropical corals that build entire reefs, which support maybe a quarter of all marine life. Cold water corals found in the deep sea. Mollusks like oysters and mussels, which are commercially vital. Crustaceans like lobsters and crabs, sea urchins, and tiny but crucial calcifying plankton like coccolithophores and foraminifera, which are also part of the biological pump.
The potential consequences are just staggering. Reef collapse, food web disruption.
Catastrophic is not too strong a word. It threatens biodiversity hotspots and major fisheries that people rely on.
Okay, that's the global chemical threat. What about more localized but equally devastating? Problems like eutrophication and anoxia, turning rich waters into dead zones.
Eutrophication. This is basically nutrient pollution, an overload of nutrients, mainly nitrogen and phosphorus, entering coastal waters.
Where do these excess nutrients come from?
Mostly from land-based activities. The source lists untreated sewage discharges, runoff from agricultural fields using lots of fertilizer, animal waste from livestock operations, even runoff from things like golf courses.
So human waste and agricultural runoff are the main culprits. How does this nutrient overload kill marine life?
It triggers a deadly cascade. The excess nutrients act like fertilizer for algae in the water, causing massive rapid growth and algal bloom. Sometimes these are called red tides or brown tides.
Okay, lots of algae. That sounds like food.
Initially, maybe. But when this huge mass of algae eventually dies and sinks, bacteria move in. to decompose all that organic matter. And this decomposition process consumes oxygen, a lot of oxygen.
So the bacteria use up the oxygen in the water.
They deplete the dissolved oxygen DO dramatically. This leads to hypoxic, low oxygen, or even anoxic, no oxygen conditions, especially near the bottom. We call these areas dead zones.
Anything that needs oxygen to breathe.
Suffocates. Fish, crabs, oysters, worms, any organism that can't quickly swim away or tolerate very low oxygen levels will die. It leads to mass mortality events, drastically alters the ecosystem, and favors only a few hardy, often undesirable species.
Devastating for local fisheries and biodiversity. All right, third major threat, chemical contamination and biomagnification. These are pollutants that don't break down.
Exactly. We're talking about non-degradable pollutants. Persistent organic pollutants, or POPs, like the infamous pesticide DDT, dichlorodenyltrichloroethane, and other chlorinated hydrocarbons. Heavy metals like mercury and lead also fall into this category.
Why are they so dangerous?
Two main reasons. First, organisms often lack the metabolic pathways to break them down, so they accumulate in tissues, especially fatty tissues. Second, they undergo biomagnification.
Meaning they concentrate up the food chain?
Precisely. A small concentration in plankton gets magnified in the zooplankton that eat them, magnified further in the small fish that eat the zooplankton, and magnified even more in the large predatory fish, birds, or marine mammals at the top. The concentration can increase thousands or even millions of times from the bottom to the top of the food web.
And the source gives details on DDT's effects, which are pretty chilling even at low concentrations in top predators.
They really are. DBT is known to act as an endocrine disruptor. It depresses estrogen and testosterone activity, messing with reproductive hormones. In birds, like eagles or pelicans, it famously interferes with calcium metabolism, leading to thin, fragile eggshells that break during incubation. This caused massive population crashes.
And a risk to humans, too.
Potentially, yes. Because DDT accumulates in fat, it can concentrate in the milk fat of mammals, including humans, posing a risk, particularly to nursing infants.
And it's not just DDT. Heavy metals like mercury are also a major problem, especially near industrial areas.
Yes, mercury is highly toxic and unfortunately quite common in polluted water bodies, often from industrial discharge. Bacteria in aquatic systems can convert it into methylmercury, which is easily absorbed by organisms and biomagnifies very efficiently.
Where are the hotspots mentioned?
The material points to coastal areas near major industrial centers like Mumbai, Kolkata, and Karwar in Karnataka as having significant issues with mercury contamination in water and concentrating in fish stocks, posing a health risk through seafood consumption.
Okay, finally we have the physical threats. Physical habitat loss and rising sea levels. These often go hand in hand.
They do. Coastal development, dredging, destructive fishing practices, they all physically destroy critical habitats. The source specifically mentions the Coastal Regulation Zone, CRZ, rules in India, particularly CRZII.
What do those protect?
CRZI designates ecologically sensitive areas like mangroves and coral reefs. The rules generally prohibit new construction in these zones to protect their integrity. There are very narrow exceptions, like for weather radar, but only if it doesn't disrupt natural processes like tidal flow.
So there's some regulatory protection, but these habitats face a much larger systemic threat from climate change, right?
Absolutely. The regulations are crucial, but they are being undermined by the overarching issue of rising sea levels. This is happening for two main reasons: thermal expansion, warmer water takes up more space, and the melting of glaciers and ice sheets.
And how does higher sea level hurt mangroves and corals?
Both are very sensitive to water depth and salinity. Corals need shallow, clear water for their symbiotic algae to photosynthesize. Deeper water means less light. Mangroves are adapted to specific tidal inundation levels and salinity gradients. Rising seas can drown them or alter the salinity too much.
Which impact?
It severely impacts the vast numbers of fish and invertebrates that rely on these habitats, especially as nursery grounds. And that, in turn, directly affects the coastal communities and fisheries that depend on them for food and income. It's a direct link from climate change to habitat loss to socioeconomic impact. Hashtag dedicated chapter Q&A segment.
Okay, that covers the major threats. Now let's move to our dedicated Q&A segment, pulling together some of these concepts. We've talked about microscopic phytoplankton and macroscopic seagrasses. Both are primary producers, using sunlight for energy. But what's the fundamental difference in their ecological roles in the marine environment?
That's a great synthesis question. While both are producers, their size, structure, and location dictate vastly different primary ecological functions beyond just fixing carbon. It comes down to their niche.
Okay, break it down for us. Start with the phytoplankton.
Phytoplankton, as we've discussed, are microscopic free-floating algae. They inhabit the vast open ocean, the pelagic zone. Because of their sheer abundance and distribution throughout the sunlit surface waters globally, they are responsible for the vast majority, the bulk of oceanic primary production. Their primary role is converting solar energy into biomass, forming the base of the open ocean food web and driving that global biological carbon pump. Think energy foundation and global carbon cycling.
Got it. Energy for the open ocean. Now, seagrasses.
Seagrasses are macroscopic, rooted flowering plants confined to shallow coastal benthic zones. Their primary ecological role isn't just production, it's ecosystem engineering. Their physical structure, leaves, roots, rhizomes, creates complex habitats. They stabilize sediments, reduce wave energy, improve water clarity, and, critically, provide essential nursery grounds and shelter for a huge diversity of coastal species. Their main role is habitat creation and coastal stabilization.
So one is the energy engine for the blue water, the other is the habitat architect for the coasts.
That's a perfect way to put it. Foundational energy source versus foundational habitat structure. Both vital, but performing very different key roles. #outro.
That distinction really clarifies their importance.
No.
Okay, let's wrap up by distilling the key takeaways. Time for our prelims, pointers, and mains insights.
All right, for quick recall, your prelims pointers. Remember plankton, drifters, floaters. Nekton, active swimmers. Benthos, importance, bottom dwellers. Key difference. Seagrass are flowering plants, angiosperms, distinct from algae like seaweeds. Major threat link. Ocean acidification impacts calcifying organisms, think corals, shellfish, lobsters, by reducing carbonate ions. Eutrophication, nutrient overload, leads to anoxia or dead zones due to oxygen depletion. And that unique policy point, dolphins declared non-human persons in India, leading to a ban on their captivity for entertainment.
Got it. Now, for the broader connections, the mains insights. The discussion on pollutants like DDT and Mercury, which travel far, really brings up the idea of the ocean as a shared global resource, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The ocean, particularly the high seas beyond national boundaries, is a classic example of a global common. Managing threats that cross borders, like marine pollution that travels on currents or the challenge of regulating migratory fish stocks to prevent overfishing, requires strong international cooperation and effective global governance structures. These aren't problems any one country can solve alone.
And tying it all together, the health of these marine ecosystems isn't just an environmental issue, it's fundamentally linked to economies and people's lives.
Directly. The damage caused by ocean acidification to coral reefs and shellfish, the destruction of seagrass nurseries by pollution or physical damage, the depletion of fish stocks through overfishing or dead zones, all of this directly undermines the blue economy. It threatens the livelihoods and food security of hundreds of millions of people in coastal communities worldwide. Protecting marine biodiversity and ecosystem function is economic policy and human security policy.
So what does this all mean? We began this deep dive looking at life often too small to see, driving the biggest processes on Earth.
We did, and we established that these microscopic phytoplankton are the engines behind the biological pump, constantly removing enormous amounts of carbon dioxide from our atmosphere and locking it away in the deep ocean. So the final thought I want to leave you with is this. Consider the immense global climate risk we face. If these foundational organisms, the very base of the marine food web and a key climate regulator, succumb to the combined pressures we've discussed, pollution, warming, habitat loss, and especially ocean acidification, the stability of our planet's climate hinges, in a very real way, on the health of life invisible to the naked eye. That's the scale of what's at stake.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Telegram and Instagram. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.